Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something that is, well, it's near and dear to my heart. It's happy but very sad at the same time, and that is we lost a major musician in June. And I hadn't had a chance to do a video on him, but it is Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And I know most of you are way too young to be into the Beach Boys, at least when I look around and look at all the people out there that watch my YouTube. But let me tell you a little bit about them. They really had a unique sound, and it changed everything way back in the day. It was amazing, and I know you've probably heard some of the songs. You just didn't know who or what they were. And the big one probably that's the most, probably the most popular is Good Vibrations. I mean, they use all these songs in commercials and things like that today. But Good Vibrations, Surfin' USA, and so many good songs that they changed, and their sound was so unique. And really, what you don't know is this put California on the map as being paradise. And I think a lot of people moved to California because the whole thought and idea was that everyone was out there surfing and on the beach and dancing and partying, and it's beautiful. Well, this was the image. And you know what? Actually, I had a friend whose mother was in the movie business, and she had a house on the beach back in the day. And I said, was it really like that? Were there really people just dancing to Beach Boy music on the beach back then? And you know what he said? I thought he'd laugh at me. He says, you know what? Really, it was like that. It really did happen. I thought, wow, how fun, how cool would that be? So this was a whole era. It was in the early 60s that the Beach Boys came out, and they had their unique sound, and it just looks so fun. Everybody's surfing. It's a blast. But let me tell you, nothing could be further from the truth looking and hearing about Brian Wilson's life as the lead singer and songwriter of the Beach Boys. And you know, the Beach Boys were brothers. There was Dennis, who drowned later, and he was actually a surfer. And Carl, who actually died of lung cancer in the 90s, which, you know, if you know anything about the 70s, my God, there was so much cigarette smoking. It was everywhere you went, everyone smoked. Everywhere, even on airplanes. You all don't realize that. Restaurants, airplanes, everyone smoked just about. But aside from all that, there was also a cousin involved. His name was Mike Love. And, but Dennis and Carl, yeah, they were part of the family. And Brian, let me tell you, there's actually a life story or about him on Netflix that is excellent. You should see it. It tells about his life and his struggles. And what was wrong was, in looking at his chart, Brian had such a difficult childhood with his parents and his brothers. And I think part of it was because he was so famous. You know, all of a sudden this kid was world famous. But Brian had mental disease. He had major mental problems. And what happened was he became schizophrenic. And some of you don't realize that schizophrenia is something that comes on later. You don't show signs of it when you're a child. It comes on in the teenage years. Most people don't recognize it right away because they didn't have it previously. And usually, not always, it strikes boys. So he became schizophrenic, and of course it didn't help that he was doing tons of drugs, but he was paranoid and he couldn't go on stage. But he wrote the most incredibly creative lyrics ever. Really, it was astounding. All of his songs were like about surfing and, you know, being on the beach and girls. Guess what? He didn't even surf. He didn't even like the water. Isn't that ironic? But his brother Dennis was a surfer. And he was so out there. Brian was so out there. Aside from his mental problems, he created some of these sounds that are beyond belief. And of course he was experimenting, being mentally ill with LSD all at the same time. So here we have a whole pack of problems. But the music he produced was unbelievable. And let's see, yes, it was called Pet Sounds. He came up with this album called Pet Sounds. Everybody said he was crazy, but it was incredible. It's like one of my favorite songs on it, Wouldn't It Be Nice? I love that song. And there was just so much to it. Because you know what? He really related to his dogs, and that's why he did this Pet Sounds. But here's the thing about his life with Brian. Brian had a psychiatrist that came into his life, and pretty much, well, definitely he controlled his life, became his bodyguard, controlled everything, controlled his medication to the point where he had him so drugged up that the psychiatrist took a hold of his money and finances and was actually paying himself, aside from everything else, $1 million a year. But he wouldn't allow Brian out of the house, nor meet with other people. It's a nightmare, and kept him on drugs that kept him numb and comatose. As a matter of fact, I forgot how long he was in bed, but for years he never got out of his bed. This is dramatic, so I think with a little bit of what I'm telling you, now I want to look at his chart with you and see if we can see some of these things in his life. So let me scoot over here. We are going to look at Brian Wilson's chart here, the Beach Boy. And he wrote all the time, all the music. You know, back in the day, a lot of major people didn't write their own music. Elvis Presley didn't write his songs, but they wrote their own music. Brian was a genius in this area. And you know how people can be one extreme or the other. They can be so genius, but on the other end, they're emotionally so immature and mentally ill in this case. So let's pull up Brian's chart. And by the way, he just passed away on June 11th. And first let's analyze this chart, because I mean, there has to be brilliance in this chart to produce what he did. That was really changed the whole scene in music in the day. It was remarkable. So looking at his chart, he has a Taurus ascendant right there at 3 degrees of Taurus. Now, right off the bat, I just realized that that is the degree of Algol, which is the worst fixed star in the heavens. Algol is the star that actually deals with beheading, which deals with losing your head. So poor Brian, he has this star exactly on his ascendant degree. Remember, the ascendant is who you are. This star deals so much with addictions and addictive people too, and losing their minds, losing their life. This is the culprit right here, 3 degrees of Taurus. That is on Algol. Now, another thing is Uranus sits in his first house close to the ascendant. Talk about unconventional, out there, crazy downloads from other dimensions. That's Uranus on the ascendant. Being different, not fitting in, being unconventional, never wanting to fit in, unique, outrageous, visionary. But Saturn's there as well, and Saturn makes it heavy and not free. So he was trapped with this mental stuff, because Saturn is even with Mercury in the first house, and Mercury's even retrograde. So Saturn Mercury can be really heavy and serious in many, many ways. Now, let's hop over to where his moon is. Now, his moon sits in Leo, and it's even in the nakshatra called Purva Falguni. That nakshatra is the most creative nakshatra of all. Many entertainers, performers, actors, singers have this nakshatra strong. So there you go. And what magnifies that moon in Purva Falguni is Rahu. And don't forget, the moon is the mind. So guess what? Rahu moon, people can be out there crazy, just too much mental energy. But it magnifies his creative talent. But still, it is way too much energy. Now, with his moon Rahu being in the fourth house, it's actually the house of home, family, and the mother. And it makes me wonder, what kind of mother did he have? So I Googled it, and it said his mother was a severe alcoholic as well. And Rahu can deal with addictions. It's right on top of the moon. And not only that, the moon's the mother, the fourth house is the mother. So there you go. So the mother wasn't really there. He was close to his mother, I read, but his mother didn't stick up for him and defend him against the biggest tyrant of his life, aside from the psychiatrist, his father. His father, he actually had to sue his father to get away from him. His father controlled everything, kind of like the Jacksons, right? And he was a tyrant and beat Brian. Who beats their kids like violently? This happened. And Brian had to get away from his father, and his mother didn't defend him. No wonder his mind was on edge and extreme, and he had to, well, nobody has to do this, but he felt like he had to numb himself with drugs and alcohol. Now let's go to his Mars. And his Mars sits in Cancer right on top of less than a degree, exactly conjunct Pluto. That represents violence, violent affairs and attacks and extremes. And Mars being debilitated means extreme insecurity, but extreme control and power. And really detrimental things. So you see, the Mars, Pluto are in Cancer, which are ruled by the moon. So they inflict that energy onto his moon, which is his mind, which is his emotional body. You can see it all in the chart. It is astounding what you can see in a chart. Now, going to his creative ability, of course I know it's the moon Rahu in Purva Falguni, but his Venus, which sits in the 12th house, he loved to be alone. Loved to be alone writing his music. And with Venus in the 12th house, it is actually all by itself. And looking at this Venus, it's at 28 degrees of Aries. And I find that so interesting because We're going to come to that. But the day that he died, Rahu and Ketu were at 28 degrees of Aquarius and Leo. So Ketu, which is the planet of loss, was exactly aspecting with its trinal aspect his Venus, and that's the day that he lost his life. And Venus is the planet of talent and creativity. And in this chart, Venus rules his chart. It rules Taurus. But it's in the 12th house where he would really lock himself up and create and go into his own world. Now Venus, actually, if you think about the moon Rahu being in Purva Falguni, they're ruled by, that nakshatra is ruled by Venus and connects all that talent and creative talent that Venus is all about to his moon Rahu. Now, Ketu is in the 10th house in his chart, which means a very unusual career with many, many, many changes. But Ketu can be out of this world. And that's what a lot of his talent was all about. But I also noticed that Ketu is in the nakshatra called Shatabhishak, which does deal with hard to cure diseases. And I have seen in all of my readings that it deals so many times with mental disease, because that's the hardest to cure disease of all, whether it's addictions or schizophrenia or both. And that's what it entailed in his life. Now looking at where his sun is, it's in Gemini with Jupiter. This was his creative talent. Now Jupiter is a little bit damaged by being so close to the sun, but still, Jupiter's sun can deal with optimism and expansion and opportunities. And it's in his second house of wealth and money. He was a multi-millionaire from his music, needless to say, even though he had people stealing his, and isn't it funny, Elvis Presley had the same thing. His manager was stealing all of his money and controlling and manipulating him, just like Brian Wilson's psychiatrist did the same thing to him. It's really sad that people will take advantage of someone for their selfish own desires. So, looking at this, I have to see, where is it that his father was so violent and hateful and told him he had no talent and tried to tell him what kind of music to do, because all his father ever wanted him to do was the same old sound, Beach Boys sound, over and over and over again. Where Brian was a creative genius, he wanted to create new things, and that's where the album Pet Sounds came from, and his father told him it was terrible, and it was his best album, and so creative. So, going to the 9th house, where in Vedic astrology we look at the 9th house, not the 10th. Saturn rules it, and so Saturn is in his first house, and it's conjunct Uranus, meaning the father is irrational and unpredictable. But you know, another way to look at it is you have to look at from Chandra Lagna. And I get all of my students to look at Chandra Lagna. And by the way, if you're still with me right now, I got to remind everyone, sign up for my free newsletter. Go to galacticcenter.org. Before I forget, check out my Patreon. Become part of our community. Galactic Planner. All of this is figured out for you in your chart. That's all. You can find that all on galacticcenter.org. But most of all, if this inspires you to learn Vedic astrology, my university is starting. And this is the kind of stuff we do. I will teach you how to read a chart. You will get proficient at this. The beginning class starts August 6th. So get ready and learn astrology, just like I'm doing right here. But this made me think, of my class starting, because I teach all my students to always look at a chart from the moon as the ascendant. It's called Chandra Lagna. Chandra's the moon, Lagna's the ascendant. And when you make the moon the ascendant, of course you've got Rahu in the first house with the moon, Ketu in the 7th house, problems with relationships, which he did, of course, have. And then when we go to the 9th house from the moon, count around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we come up with where Venus is in Aries. And that sounds pretty decent to have Venus in the 9th house reflecting his father. His father did get them started. He was the opportune guy that started the whole thing, seriously. But you always got to look at what planet rules the house, not only the planets in the house. And Venus is not such a great planet anyway when you're looking at Leo ascendant. Why? Yes, Leo as the ascendant. Because, well, Venus rules the 3rd house, which can be a problematic house. It also rules the 10th house from the moon. Remember, I'm making the moon the ascendant. And his dad started their career, the 10th house being the career, and Venus in the 9th house of the father. So you see, you get another layer of information by looking at Chandra Lagna. But here's the real clincher. Mars rules the 9th house of the father. And it goes with Pluto in the 12th house of loss and difficulty and endings. And Mars, ruler of the 9th house from the moon, is with Pluto. He was violent. His father was violent. You can see that by making the moon the ascendant. I think that's phenomenal. And also, if you look at his 10th house from the moon, there's where you get Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus. What that describes the crazy, outrageous ups and downs and unusual career he had as a famous musician. Okay, but next, from the moon, we have that Jupiter Sun, which goes to the 11th house from the moon and means he knows powerful, famous people that helped him with his work, good friends. And of course, Mars, Pluto in the 12th. You know, he couldn't sleep. That's another thing. 12th house deals with sleep. But the other thing I failed to mention, going back to his ascendant being Taurus, the Mars-Pluto in the 3rd house represented his brothers. They both died before him. And Dennis was a severe alcoholic and drowned. Can't remember when that happened. I think it was a long time ago. Might have been in the 70s, but don't quote me on that. But that's the issue. His siblings caused him great grief and problems as well. They constantly wanted him to go on tour, and he couldn't. He couldn't be on stage. And I did hear somebody say they saw the Beach Boys one time in concert, and they were awful. Because Brian couldn't get in front of people. He flipped out, and he had extreme stage fright. Couldn't do it. So that's that. Now, let's take a glance at the day that he passed. So pulling up the day that he died, I noticed that Jupiter was almost exactly on his sun. Jupiter was 6 degrees of Gemini on his sun. That means an easy death. He was ready to go. My goodness. He was almost 84 years old. Didn't realize he was that old. Yeah, June 20th, he would have made 84, and he died June 11th. Wow. So he was ready to go. Saturn, of course, Saturn and Neptune were squaring his sun as well. So Saturn was squaring his sun. Saturn was 6 degrees Pisces, squaring his sun at 5 degrees of Gemini. And Jupiter was there on his sun. But the thing that really took his life, really and truly took his life, were two things. And it's K2. K2 was exactly aspecting his Venus. K2 on that day was 28 degrees of Leo, and it was casting its 100% in power trinal aspect. Yes, I use the trine for Rahu and K2 as a powerful, powerful aspect. And there's his Venus at 28 degrees of Aries, and it's in his 12th house from the ascendant. And yes, and it ruled the 6th house of his health. Okay, so that's where I see his demise, leaving the planet. And that is enough, but you know what? He was happy to go. He was happy to go. And I also noticed too that transiting Mars on that day was 2 degrees of Leo, and it was squaring his ascendant at 3 degrees of Taurus. So this was the day that he chose to leave the planet, and he left easily, peacefully, and was ready. I hope he is singing the Beach Boys songs on the other side. I know his music will never die, will always be around, whether it's in an elevator or elevator music or in commercials, and or everyone loved the Beach Boys back in the day. So I just want to say goodbye to a great, wonderful musician, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Pay tribute to him because he had such a difficult life, but he was such a beautiful artist, creative and talented, but suffered greatly with mental disease and people taking advantage of him. And probably the worst part was the way that he was raised, with his mother not defending him and his father beating him. That is no way for anyone to be in this world. So our childhood always makes a deep imprint on who we are throughout our life. It always does. So with that, I think I'll close. Remember, if you would like to hear more about me, learn more about me, get readings done, take my classes, go to my website, galacticcenter.org. And if you want to study with me, go to my university, University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.